He's writing a manifesto. Apparently the only thing keeping us from liberty is a few more ideas.
We don't all have the luxury of deciding when and where we want to care about something.
Freedom is a pure idea.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
If you continue to allow this war to be fought on the Empire's terms, not yours, you are going to lose. I hope, Senator, after you've lost and the Empire reigns over the galaxy, unopposed, you will find some comfort in the knowledge that you fought according to the rules.
You think I'm crazy? Yes, I am. Revolution is not for the sane.
So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
You need to help each other. You see someone who's confused, someone who's lost. You get them moving and you keep them moving until we put this place behind us.
Remember this. Try.
My name is Brett. I am a filmmaker and Twitch streamer. I stream on Twitch at Cinemarxism. I'm a documentarian. I have a documentary called The Empathizer, which is in festivals right now. I don't know when this will come out, but if you're in Houston, first weekend of June, we'll be there.
You're a film guy. You're a bit of a cinephile.
Dude, I love movies. Yeah. And I love the radical potential of movies, like big time.
I was in your chat the other night. I think it was I asked you, if you were watching it, and you were talking about one of the episodes that we can get into, and its emotional impact on you, which is kind of why I wanted to, sit down and chat about this. Andor season 2 finale just happened. I don't know about you, but right after I finished watching the season finale, I was like, well, I got to go watch Rogue One now. And I
haven't rewatched Rogue One yet. I couldn't convince Becca to last night.
Well, I did, like, right afterwards, and obviously a movie, especially like a 90-minute run, something like Rogue One, pales in comparison to a 2-season epic the way that Andor is, but it's still a good movie. It's still the best of the Star Wars films. I will say, however, it doesn't hit the way that Andor does.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know. I think Andor has like a very specific objective and like to show. Okay, so I think when we start talking about Andor, I think it's like you have to talk about the way that it represents not only the rebellion but also like the Empire, and then like I don't think there's another Star Wars property that really like shows the effect of the Empire on like normal everyday people. And like in this season you saw it from like the beginning with like the sweeps and like the visa checks and like how just like genuinely like oppressive the regime is and how they just like are picking people up, or even like in the later episodes when you see like people being in chains, like false accusations, and just like executed in the middle of the city square, stuff like that. Like I feel like that's actually somewhere that like Star Wars has like avoided showing for a really long time, like where it's like the Empire is bad, just like look at their production design,
Right. It's very on its nose, and
yeah,
Andor does it goes to great lengths to show that the Empire is not just bad because it's the Empire. There are motivations, there's myth building, there's indoctrination, there's the perception of what people within the Empire, like Cyril Karn is such a incredible character, and I didn't like his ending, but in a way I think it's a representation of like how quickly the fascist boomerang comes back on its like most ardent of followers, even if like they're not ones in high positions of power. It eventually like starts to attack the people who believe in it the most.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cyril is an obvious example, but by the end of the series, almost every single character that we follow or know through the Empire is killed, and not even like only here the other like major guy is killed by the Resistance. Almost everybody else is like eaten up inside of the Empire.
Yeah.
You know, or eaten by the Empire, right? And so yeah, I definitely think there is like there's a lot to be said about the like death cult of fascism in in this in a big way, but also I think like in general, like you know, the series like says really resoundingly that like your cowardice won't save you. You know, like the only way that we stay safe is by resisting and by fighting back.
Yeah.
And like I just think it did such a great job, especially in season 2, of like to me the thing about season 2 is like it's a conversation about like radical discipline. Like from like the very beginning, whenever he meets with that group and they don't have like a clear chain of command, they don't have any kind of like leadership structure, they've like lost their leader, and it's like devolving into like, you know, crazy like infighting and stuff. Yeah, it's just like there's a huge lack of discipline that like Andor knows like this is like not good and I need to get out of. And then whenever Andor goes to Gormon for the first time, and like the woman like comes and tries to like talk to him early before their like scheduled meetup and outside of the way that they've established it, and he has to kind of be like, you know, he's like, he has to like sit her down and be like, you could put every single person you know in an Imperial cage right now.
Yeah.
Like you need to fucking wise up. You need to get disciplined. Like you need to understand the severity of what you're going through and everything. Like those moments, and also just like how Andor like got onto Gorman, like seeing him listening to his like backstory and assuming this new identity and like all of the security culture that he is going through and the discipline that he is demonstrating for the movement is really beautiful. And I you know, I think it's interesting to talk about in this specific moment that we're into with like streamers getting like clapped at, or like getting, you know, pulled aside and detained at airports and stuff like that. And you know, I had a lawyer on stream the other night to talk about that, and he said something that was like very that I've been like chewing on a lot for the past few days, which is like revolution is illegal.
Yep, I saw your clip on.
Do you know what I mean?
Twitter
Like it's like it's like something we really need to internalize, that we're not going, like the things we want to do are not going to be allowed by the state. And like it's like, you know, how do we operate? What is the discipline that requires? And like, you know, like generating and developing a protocols for these kind of things, practicing asserting your rights, and also like having that be one tool in an OPSEC toolkit of like, you know, of everything, to not, you know, like to be disciplined in this, right? Like, and I thought Andor for this moment was like such an incredible contribution.
It almost feels like Hollywood wants to put out something that's topical in periods of, you know, political instability, whether it's like internally or externally within the US. Hollywood likes to put out, like, when we were going through 2016, there was a lot of films about that were allegories for class dynamics and interclass antagonisms or immigration, you know, general allegories for capitalism. The Boys, Parasite, I'm a Virgo, Sorry to Bother You, you know, a lot of Boots Riley pieces. And Andor, I think, explores two pieces of that. One is the, like, real world references, and the other is the mythology of both, like a romanticized revolution and also the mythologies of fascism. Because you said something very interesting in your stream the other night, that we are lucky to be living in our type of fascism, in that it is a buffoonish, flailing, incompetent, and, you know, just moronic fascism, while the Empire is a distillation of the mythology of it, that it's, you know, it's cruel for the sake of cruelty, which ours is as well, but it's cruel in a methodical, cold, calculated, and there's a great video breakdown on the line from the Nemix Manifesto, The Mask of Fear, and that doctrine that I think it's a Tarkin put forward in the extended canon. The Mask of Fear is like the thing that they put forward as, here's how we operate. We don't just operate through propaganda. We don't just operate through threats of imprisonment and cruelty. We have to constantly make people afraid of us, because if we let up for even a second, they will start to push back.
Yeah, I think they said that line in like the last, whenever he's like listening to the to like the broadcast, right? So yeah.
I can't remember the name of the general, but in his this is full of spoilers. You don't have to worry about not spoiling anything. Well, he's listening to Nemix Manifesto, which is a incredible piece of writing from Tony Gilroy, the original screenwriter for Rogue One, but the screenwriter and director for Andor season 1 and 2, where he mentions in the manifesto, oppression is the mask of fear, and oppression is it bends, it breaks, it's frail because it requires constant effort. And that's part of that doctrine of fear, that if they give them a second of breathing room, then they'll recognize that it doesn't have to be the way it always is. And I try and impart that on, my community, that like this will end, but it has to be forced to end. It doesn't want to. It has to be made to end.
Yeah, nothing that they have planned is inevitable.
Right.
And I think that's like important to remind people like all the time, right? Like, is that like fascists thrive on the appearance of like all powerfulness and like the the panopticon of like you're always being watched and like you can't get away with doing anything. And the truth is that that's not the case, right? Like they they know that if there is like continued in mass resistance, that this will make their lives a lot harder, and that we can actually prevent a lot of their policy decisions from actually like going in, in like a collective action, like mass scale way. But again, I think like it's also like what like back to Andor, like they're very aware of the stakes, and like I think there's like okay, something that I actually wanted to talk with you about as people who both have like significant others that we've been with for a long time, like the end of the second arc where he finally returns home and he's like I'm done with this. And he meets his lover. I can't remember her name right now, unfortunately, but like her leaving and like them having to like make that sacrifice, that this like the revolution, like fighting against this suppression, doing what's right, and like creating like justice, and on that scale requires like such immense sacrifice. And like that part gutted me like really hard, like thinking that like, oh God, like this struggle is worth it, but like we will have to give like so much for that, right?
And that's in like the most extreme forms of resistance, the deep personal sacrifices that one has to put aside for the cause, whatever it is. We make small sacrifices in our mental health. Burnout's a big problem in activist communities. These are, whether we like to think about it. There was an interaction you and I had at the DNC that I think about sometimes, where I told chatters whenever there were those protesters that were trying to pull people from the main route to the perimeter of the DNC's area, and my immediate thought, because this is like I hadn't been in a protest in a long time, this is like a new city, I had just arrived, my immediate thought was like, oh, this feels like some op shit. I like said into your chat, into the cameras, like, remember, like, don't go crazy at these kind of things, like, you're not a revolutionary. And I think about like my immediate reaction to that as seeing someone's impassioned resistance, and my immediate thought was my immediate safety instead of what it is on a macro level, right? And Andor, he didn't like have that choice put upon him. He didn't approve his significant other leaving. Like that was a choice made for him. But for her to, and as it's revealed later on, make a sacrifice for her, force that on Andor, and even on, what was their child later on. That is such a gut-wrenching sacrifice that one would have to like make that consideration. Because it wasn't just Andor needs to, like, he's important, he needs to focus on this. There's no resistance, there's no rebellion or revolution without him. But also, I'm a distraction, he's a distraction to me, and a child would be the end of it. He would never do it. I don't know how.
Yeah,
one
and
can
Andor's
make
like
those
needed, and
sacrifices.
that he's needed to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like
it's.
I mean, and
difficult
it's
to
tough too
comprehend.
because like, unfortunately, like that is kind of how like fascist governments work too. Like they like if even modern examples of like places where press are targeted or like dissidents are targeted, they don't just go after the dissident, they go after the
the viewer,
the circle. They go after the people closest to them too. And so it's like it's true, and it's like it's really unfortunate that we even have to be like having these conversations right now at all. It's a mad injustice, but there are some things like we're not in control of, and when you're I think we're both a little too far into this now to be like pulling out, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
it's on us forever. Like sometimes I get the questions in my community of, would you ever like run for office? And I'm like, no. One, it's not what I want to do, right? That's not. I don't think I would be a good person in that position. But also, the amount of OPSEC or oppo research rather that someone could do on a person like me, like there's no way. I'm too vocal. I'm too outside of that. I think people who are vocal online is one thing, but as someone with like a very prominent online persona, whatever, repertoire that you could pull from, it's just not tenable. And
I mean, you say that, but Pete Hegseth is the got kicked out of the military for having racist, everyone in power right now has a long list of like horrible things they've done in the past, and that doesn't bother them, right? Like nothing that you've done could ever compare to.
Yeah, but none of that goes against like the State Department. That's pretty normal stuff. It's a requirement for Florida to be a politician.
Yeah.
Everything he's done. It kind of like reminds me of like Luthen's his trajectory, right? He like goes from this like part of the mechanism. I kind of wish that wasn't part of his arc. I like to think of him as like, either a class traitor or somebody who just got sick and tired of it. But him being like I guess he was supposed to be like part of the Empire, just like,
yeah, he was like a captain. It seemed like,
a captain who
was doing genocide, was just doing mass executions of villages.
Yeah, and then it like breaks him, and he sees an opportunity to like redeem himself, but also how redemption comes with more than just saving one life. It requires like killing who he was in the past and saving more people. You can't just like save one person and like, oh, yep, I'm redeemed. There's more to it than that, right? His trajectory throughout the entire season is awesome. Skarsgård is a phenomenal actor regardless. There's a scene where he and Deidre are talking to each other when he's like first is discovered, and they're both playing a game of counterweight to see who's going to break first. Who's the one that's going to, let up on their character they're putting out. And to go back to like how fascism always collapses in on itself, Deidre cannot wait. She cannot wait to be like, I got you, motherfucker. I got your ass. And Luthen, the whole time, he was locked in. He was ready to ride that out and see where it went. I loved the commitment he had, even to like sacrifice his own life for the cause.
Yeah. No, yeah, Luthen's story was very, very interesting, and I did like the exploration into the backstory with Clea too. I mean, the whole time we were watching the show, we were like, "Who is she? She's so amazing! Like, what? I need more. I want more." And I was really happy that we did get that.
Yeah, I saw theories that he was like her older brother or some shit, and I was like, no, it would be dumb if they were related. It would be so unworth it.
Yeah, I also do think that, like, you know, I come back to discipline with, like, you know, Lutheran, I think, brought that from his like military experience and was like really imparted that into Clea, and that like put them in the position to be able to have the security to like kind of like foment the embers of the revolution across the galaxy, right? And like doing it from like the heart of the empire and being close to, like, you know, senators and having that position in society, and you know, that could only happen with like the most intense discipline, like, and it's because, like, you know, yeah, once again, like the stakes are incredibly high and very well established in the story, and so, like, you know, it is what it is. Yeah,
Clea's moment when they're in the art gallery, not at their like home base in the like the party on Mon Mothma's home planet, where they're trying to remove a listening device that they had implanted. Again, just they have so much intelligence that they're constantly gathering, because like knowledge is power. And she's trying to remove this device, and there's a Imperial informant that she's talking to, and she's like, "You will get us both killed. Lock in right now."
Yeah.
That guy's arc of constantly thinking about his wife, constantly thinking about how he's going to like keep himself safe from, you know, being discovered, was interesting because there was no payoff for him at any point. He had nothing.
Well, yeah, but it's also like, I mean, we see what the result is for other people who weren't working with the rebellion. You know, like everyone in that immediate circle was eaten by the Empire by the end of the film. You know, so it's like the end result is the same. Your cowardice, your worry about your self safety and your attempts to protect yourself will not protect you. Like, at the end of the day, this all has one destination for all of us. And it doesn't matter how close it doesn't matter how, you know, much you comply. It doesn't matter, like, it doesn't, none of it matters. Like, it's a death cult. And like, we are, you know, and I also think there's something like kind of interesting about the Empire. And this will, I think, bring us into an interesting conversation too, because there are obviously a lot of like direct comparisons that I don't know if they were making. Like, I don't know when this was written. I don't know how.
Right after season 1, so like 2022, 2023, they were already working on season 2.
But before October 7th, before the start of the like genocide in Gaza, right? And so, like, I think watching episode 8 now, with like the Gorman massacre, you know, there's like the scene at the end where the woman is like trying to get the message out and explain what happened there. Like, that just felt like I was on Bassan's Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like such a direct comparison, you know. And then they go later and are saying like, you know, that the, you know, Mothma's speech like explicitly uses the word genocide, which, like, I don't know if that's ever been used in any Disney property.
I don't think so.
Like, ever, you know, like, and so for them to use that word and use it so clearly and like, you know, say what it is, you know, it felt like it was a real call to action, not just, but like to all Americans to like look into Gaza, see your humanity in it, like, you know, and understand that this is how the Empire works. But there's also like something interesting about the Empire where they're not explicitly ethno-nationalist or like you know what I mean? Like,
they're all human.
They're all that's true. But there's like Admiral Thorne.
Yeah, Thrawn. He's the only one who's not, that I've ever really seen. Yeah, Thrawn, I think is his name, or Thorn. Blue guy.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's Thrawn. But like, yeah, I'm like, I guess you're right. Palpatine is like human too. Yeah, everybody. I guess it's like a human supremacist, but they don't really address that. It's not like incredibly explicit.
Yeah, it's just about control.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like fascism in its like diluted form. There's not really like an ideology supporting the Empire at all outside of just control and like domination, right?
Yeah, it's I think it's kind of Mussolini's. I mean, he had his own like ethno-nationalist ideals, but Mussolini talked about how fascism can be most appropriately called corporatism, and everything involved in the empire throughout most of any depictions of it in any Star Wars property is that it's controlling trade routes, taxation, resources, territorial control. Like it's the most digestible form of fascism that people can understand outside of just like, oh, this group is subhuman.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. So I think without that like ethno-nationalism like explicitly stated or such or anything, and since it hasn't been a part of the empire before, like I don't know how you would introduce it now or anything, but I don't know. It is an interesting concept, and I don't know. I just felt like the comparisons between Gaza and were so clear. They were so incredibly clear. From the very beginning.
There's a line in that desperate message that they're trying to get out, like right at the end of it before they cut away to Andor driving off, where she's saying like, "This is a massacre. This is the true face of the Empire," and then she ends it with, "This is murder," and that reminded me of Jesse Wells as a musician that's been gaining a lot of prominence for his like folk music. Very rooted in the old folk music style, and he has a song "War is a Murder," and it reminded me of that immediately. It's like, in its most distilled down form, war, imperialism, colonialism, it's just unrequited murder of people first and foremost, but of their identities, their language, their history. It's just mass scale murder beyond the lives that it affects. And you are right. It did remind me of Bassan and Ahmad, all of the people that we've watched be murdered by the Israeli state, and the United States is, complicity in it. The Gorman massacre, when I first heard that they were going to be doing it, I thought they were going to show the first one. I thought that they were going to show, is it Krennic? I can't remember what his name is. Tarkin, when he landed a ship on them, and I was like, they're showing that. Disney's going crazy. But they went even, I think what they depicted was probably more brutal. Like the theatricality of landing a ship on people. There's only so much you can show without it being just blood and guts. Be a little too far. And this, I think, was way beyond what the first massacre would have been. Because they took their time with that scene. It built and it built and it built. And it took the entire episode to go through.
Yeah. I mean, just as somebody who's like been at a lot of protests, like has seen police like brutalize protesters without any, discretion or reason or, it was really, 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 really intense to watch, and also just like kind of like placing it in the, in like the potential futures of the moment that we live in. It's like,
because like we see those depictions in media, but also in other countries. I remember Carter saying something about the rationalization that a lot of people have when it comes to oppressed groups or the violations of people's rights. Is a lot of the rationalization that you find, especially Americans have, is couldn't be me. It couldn't be me. I couldn't be arrested for, having tattoos that Photoshop to say MS-13. And I think it's how we look at instances of state violence in other countries, whether it's in Gaza, the West Bank, whether it's in like El Salvador with the recent protests, wherever it is. That filter of the screen removes a lot of like the real impact of it. That these are actual lives, these are actual people with like hopes and dreams and whatnot. And them taking such a long time with that scene, every character you got even just a little bit of screen time with, you felt what that end was like. It hurt to watch. Even like the girl that you were saying he met up with, that Andor met up with, like her death was quick, but it didn't lose its weight.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like also, can we just have a moment for how fucking horrifying battle drones are?
Oh,
Like
the KX units. Oh my god.
yes, like anytime those are like used on like humans, it's like
Yeah.
so unbelievably horrifying. It just like is shocking. But no, you're right. I think and also like I mean, with regards to that scene and the build up and everything, like I think they did a great job of like just showing like how this isn't even the radicals, that this isn't even like the rebellion that's like organizing this
People
protest.
like saw it and were like, okay, I'll come.
Yeah, it's just like people coming out of their homes, and like that's how these work. Like, you know, like during BLM, there was like a bunch of people who had never been to a protest before, who were just fucking fed up with the way the police treat them, fed up with the way the world is at the moment, and wanted to go out and express their discontent. And like, what does it mean when we live in a society where doing that can get you locked in a jail cell for extended periods of time? Or what does that mean whenever, you know, like we saw in UCLA and at Pico Robinson in LA, that a group of fascist counter protesters are going to be allowed to come and throw explosives and, you know, do whatever, you know, like they want, and nobody's arrested, and the police never show up. Like, you know, like this idea that like I don't know, that we can just always be like this idea that like we can always like protest and do like peaceful protests and everything, and that will like cause change, I think is something that we should really like examine. And like also it's like I mean like it's not, unfortunately, like right now it's like they were calling Tesla, like people protesting at Tesla facilities, like domestic terrorists. Those were old fucking liberals. Like those
Canadian
protests,
hippies.
like the 50-51, like that kind of those kind of mass demonstrations that are happening right now, those are not led by the left. Like the left is like largely ignoring those, and I think that's a mistake by the left. Like but they're not. And so like those are, it's going to be old like people who have voted Republican sometimes, voted Democrat sometimes, but are fucking fed up with Trump, or like, you know what I mean? Like it's just going to be random folks whenever this finally hits. And then after that, it's going to be like nobody, right? Like what is it actually going to look like if there's not like, if suppress is actually targeted and like, you know, countered? Like I think people are overestimating that there's going to be some like blowback on that. I think it's just as likely that if somebody like Hassan gets arrested, or there is like a mass arrest or a mass violent moment at a protest, like I think a lot of people are gonna probably like
couldn't be
retreat. Yeah, and like they're gonna be like, whoa. I mean, like like and that paired with like the massive media apparatus that is like 100% goose stepping alongside Donald Trump, and the lies that we saw them like the manufactured reality that we saw them concoct about the Gaza like encampments, like I think you're gonna see a lot of people just like believe what the media tells them, and like protest movements are going to be slandered, and like a lot of people are just going to like kind of fall back into the wings. And so, you know, what does that mean for us if that does happen? What does that mean for like people who are going to continue to do this? What does that mean for like you know, mounting any kind of resistance and stuff? And I'm not saying this to like give doomer vibes, but I think it's just something we have to like think through. And like, you know, that a Gorman moment, you know, I don't want to like speak anything into his existence, but like, you know, we're closer to there now than we have probably been in our lifetimes in America.
Yeah, at least domestically, for sure.
Yeah.
I often think about that. Like, what is the breaking point? Is there a breaking point for like the broader population? Because people have been screaming that there is just a unrequited slaughter happening, but because it's far afield and, you know, it's across the ocean, and we have decades of propaganda, you know, anti-Arab, Islamophobic propaganda, people rationalize it and they're like, oh, well, it shouldn't be terrorists. Oh, well, human shields, whatever. Yeah. But when it's happening to Americans, which it has been, it happened in 2020, it happened during the Freddie Gray uprisings, it happened during the anti-war protests both in Vietnam and the war on terror. It's happened for the last year and a half, that the state will just crack down on people. It's not them just using live ammunition. It's not a Kent State moment. But is that all it takes? Is that what, you know, the American empire has realized? Like, as long as we're not firing live ammunition, you know, people will continue to eat it. And
I think you're 100% right. And I actually, you know, I had a tweet about this earlier, but like America has become so entrenched in incarceration and like, you know, imprisonment that like I think you nailed it. Like, it's just gonna be people get disappeared and like, you know, it might be a news story for 1 or 2 days every time this happens, but like no collective, you know, story is built, and like the story just like we move on to the next thing, because this is how Trump works, right? Is it's always a constant barrage of new news stories to tell, new groundbreaking, you know, violations and unprecedented actions, that everything has to be covered and nothing is ever like actually addressed. Like, these things just happen and then people move on, you know what I mean?
The flooding of the zone strategy has turned out to be extremely effective. And this has always been a kind of passive strategy of corporate media. You know, we bleed a story until it's dry, and that usually lasts about, you know, 72 hours, and then we move into whatever the next hot story is. But it's a daily barrage. There's like 3 to 5 stories every day to cover, and I can never get to it in a 6-7 hour broadcast. I can't adequately get to, you know, everything that's important, which is why I'm glad we have like a broader, you know, network of cohorts that are covering whether it's something that's important to them or it's just, you know, getting to things that others weren't able to get to. But it's not enough. There's not enough eyes on it, and we're in a very niche space. The kind of, to go back to the security theater that you were talking about, in tandem with the security theater was a consistent comms apparatus that they had. There was sectarian infighting amongst like the rebellion, but they were all in constant communication with each other. With the only
but also in alliance, right? Like they were able to set aside their differences and like form alliances. And I thought that it actually portrayed it really well. That like this was almost like some of the, you know, the sacrifices that we need to make, and like, you know, him like Andor going there, presenting the info from Luthen, and them all being like, well, we don't like Luthen, and like having that moment of like, you know, oh, like, dude, that same exact shit would happen today if there's any kind of like broader left, like 100%. But you have to move forward, and you have to like, you know, put that aside, and you have to work with Saw Gerrera, because he's, you know what I mean? You have to work with people who you agree on the ends, but not the not the means.
And like the members of the council who immediately were like, well, it's over. Like, we're done now. Well, that's all we can do. We got to surrender. Like the ease at which people were ready to surrender, because like we use the term doomerism a lot, but like you know, and a second ago when we were going over like the kind of like cold hard reality of it, doomerism and being very pointed about like what the reality is often get conflated with one another. And there is a desire for a well designed path forward, right? People want to know what the steps are, and there was never that in any of these depictions. And this is a mythology that we're talking about with Andor. This is just a story, but I think it does represent a lot of the issues. And Tony Gilroy talked about how he read a fuck ton of revolutionary literature and history books on struggle. There's no guidebook to this. There's no, I mean, we can take notes, we can see strategies, we can, you know, take pieces of it from different regions, but like no one's gonna set it out for us. No one's going to tell people, all right, here's what you're gonna do, come back to me for step 2. We take it day by day, and like we build what we can.
Yeah. And there's also like I think it's also really interesting, the rebels never like they never really talk about what they want to build afterwards either, you know? Like it's just they're all very, very clear-minded and united in opposing and resisting the Empire.
They're like, we can talk about it after.
Taking down the Empire no matter what. There's not like a conversation of like, you know, what is the world, or like, you know, and maybe that would be something interesting to explore in any follow-ups if any Star Wars writers are watching this, because there, you know, there is like this like recurring thing in the Star Wars universe that's already established of like there being a successful rebellion, the big power structure that is at the time falling and then being replaced by another fascist empire.
Right.
You know, like this is a thing, but it's not ever really been super explored, like what happens in the moment when the empire falls or what happens in the moment immediately after the empire falls.
I think the only explorations they've done is like Luke Skywalker trying to reform the Jedi Council, but that's all like extended canon, and they kind of touch on it a little bit with the sequel trilogy that they tried to reform the Republic, but there was a lot of like opinions of like how it's supposed to be formed so that they could prevent it to happen again, which I think that's insufficient. I think you're right. Like a cool thing would be like, okay, how does Mon Mothma and like a General Leia Organa, how do they reform some kind of governing structure in a wide sweeping, territory like the galaxy?
Or even just like what went wrong, like what happened that the New Order was able to like take over again, and like
what vestiges of the Empire remained that it was able to like reform itself. I would like to see that.
I feel like there was one property, I don't remember if it was Mandalorian or maybe even the first season of Andor, but there was like one property that I remember. I guess it wouldn't be Andor, but it was like it followed like an Imperial office worker after the New Order, and they were like having like some kind of like relocation program that he was a part of. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I think you're thinking of an SNL bit.
No. It was actually in. I remember, but anyway, whatever. I think it was in Mandalorian.
I know there's the Bill Burr scene when he's talking about Operation Cinder.
Yeah.
Oh my god, what a great scene! I don't know if the same writer was on that episode, but whatever writer it was, man, they nailed it. Bill Burr fucking cooked. But yeah, there's one thing that stuck with me when I went to go from like finishing season 2 right into Rogue One is one. When you first watch Rogue One, if you hadn't seen Andor, you feel like Andor is kind of like a jaded, like war-torn, he's sick of this shit, he's ready for it to be over, any excuse to get out, kind of a cold-blooded killer. But when you see what his character development was, it completely changes your perception of Andor in Rogue One. He is very different. And there's a line in the first episode of season 2 when he's talking to an Imperial defector, and she's like nervous. She doesn't know she's going to survive, and he's like, listen.
The first scene of the season, oh my god, it was so good.
He's like, listen, you're not leaving. His words were, coming home to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's an examination there, but the kind of climax of Rogue One when Jyn Erso decides to join up with the rebellion, he tells her, welcome home, because I think that was a kind of a callback in the first episode of season 2 to that moment where there is no freedom for anybody in the galaxy. Everybody is struggling against it. And a common theme you see throughout season 2 is everybody is thinking about the day after the revolution, the day after the Empire falls. We can finally be done with it. We can put aside all this theater. We can rest. We can have a family. We can move on. And I like that that's consistent for everybody, because everyone has their own returning home to yourself. Everyone has their own day after, whether it's the 2 spies that work for Luthen that one of them dies on Gorman in their first heist operation, whether it's them going home together, whether it's Mon Mothma reforming a true galactic republic. Everyone has that, but nobody's felt incomplete in their story. Like you wonder, like, what are they going to do now? Everybody kind of like got their piece. I think the only person that was kind of left me wondering was Clea, because we never see her again. She wasn't in Rogue One. She wasn't in anything else. She was the only person where I was like, okay, what was she up to? But
yeah, Yeah, I feel you. I think she was. I mean, I kind of thought whenever she like first got up and like ripped the stuff off and everything, I thought she was just gonna like split. Like
Yeah, I thought she was gonna walk out into the woods, shell shocked.
right, like she never wanted to go with them. She never agreed to go with them. She was like, she was insisting on staying on Coruscant. But obviously is now like completely burned for the entire galaxy, so she doesn't have very many options. But yeah, spinoff show. Clea spinoff show. I would love to see it.
I would love to see it too. I'm trying to like kind of recall back to scenes that I really enjoyed, but I mean, the front to back, there wasn't a bit of fat on that thing. They had everything they needed.
It was really, really needed. And I don't know. I feel like I have seen, like, I watched Skeleton Crew. I'm a fan of Star Wars. If I hear that there's good Star Wars, I'm watching that shit. But I feel like Skeleton Crew didn't get the same amount of buzz as Andor. And so I don't know what is going on in Disney's back end, or whatever. But like, I really hope that, other writers, other creatives inside of the Star Wars machine, like see this and are willing to engage with these ideas more, willing to engage with anti-fascism, with anti-colonialism, and build this. And it's always been in the franchise, and it's just never. The only thing that I think explores it as well as Andor does is Rebels, like the TV show. The animated show.
I'm not a fan of Rebels just because of the animation style. It moves.
I'm a fan of it because of the politics. I feel like in many ways, Andor, like it's similar, where it's just you're seeing why they come to the rebellion. You're seeing the sacrifices they have to make, and like the missions that they do, and everything. And I think Rebels is great, super underrated.
I think.
But I just hope we see more of it. I hope they really, really step into their identity as a anti-fascist American property in a time where we desperately need them, and like continue to make shit like this, because it goes mad insanely hard.
I am tired of the Skywalker timeline. I'm tired of it.
Yeah,
I want like Old Republic, High Republic. There's a like really good politics in there, and my very first thought before jumping into Rogue One after season 2 is, okay, we have tied a bow on every possible like established lore piece for this timeline. We can now let it rest. We've told the story from every angle, virtually every angle. I think the only thing that we haven't told is, I mean, we did Obi-Wan, we did Ahsoka, like a series about General Grievous would suck. Like who, I guess maybe Bail Organa, to see what his angle of the building the resistance was, but I feel like it's done. I feel like that you've told the story.
Yeah.
So
I always want a droid show.
Yes.
I think droids are super interesting in the Star Wars universe. They all have like personality. There's varying degrees of agency demonstrated. Some of them like can defy orders, some of them can't, some of them think for themselves, some of them can't. Like there seems to be like a pretty good like little gradient of like consciousness represented in them, and I would love to have a show that is in the Star Wars universe and explores maybe like discrimination by humans within droids. I don't know what, it could be anything, but like I just think there's a lot to take and like run with in that, and also could be really funny because droids are usually pretty fucking funny.
Yeah I really liked was it BD or whoever they had? I think BD's from the video game, but whichever one they had, B, I think they just called him. He was very funny because he was very neurodivergent. Like he had the
red
red like wheelie
one
dude.
B2, I think it was something like that. Yeah.
He was great. I loved him. I think my favorite droid is still the one from Jedi Fallen Order. That one's sick, just because he sits on your shoulder. I like that.
Oh yeah, the little buddy,
little dude. Yeah,
awesome,
I think
too.
Becca got me. Yeah, he's up there on my shelf back there. But
nice.
Yeah, I
would love a little droid friend like that.
Yeah. aside from like going scene by scene, I think that's like all of like the major plot points that were most important. Oh, there's like one other one. Yeah, we kind of talked about it, but the scene with the general at the very last episode when he's listening to the Nemec's manifesto, and he says to himself like it just keeps spreading. Like he realizes like it's cooked, and asks his subordinate for a moment. I think like the subordinate recognized like right there, like, okay, yeah, I see what's about to happen, and you get that little payoff for him. Very, very like, on the nose for a fascist regime in its decline. But it went on for another 5 years, I think. I think the rebellion went on for another 5 years because there's like, it picks up at Rogue One, and then there's like a couple days, and then that's where New Hope picks up. And I think it's like 3 to 5 years between New Hope and Return of the Jedi. So it was collapsing, but it still took a long time to really like put that nail in the coffin.
Yeah, and again, I would love to see other things explore, like what that looked like on the ground in different, areas. Like was Gorman saved, or did they mine it to oblivion? Like like those kind of unanswered questions, and right?
Yeah. What does the reconstruction look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. Just a Mon Mothma series, the Reconstruction era.
Yeah, that would be great. That'd be cool.
Yeah, little like 8-episode series, one and done. But yeah, I think
also I did find that that character I was thinking about it is from Mandalorian.
Okay.
And they are going through an Imperial like amnesty program. So like it's like the New Republic's like Imperial amnesty program.
Oh,
it's like
fuck that. No wonder the New Order was able to reform.
So I think that's the most that they kind of get into the like why, where they're trying, like they are basically reintegrating like the same class and the same group of people into this new society, and of course they replicate and make into the new.
They do a fucking Operation Paperclip. That sucks.
Yeah, because I think Mando is probably the only one that actually shows that era, which it would be like the post Empire, like beginning of the new order kind of thing.
There was one character, I think it was Gina Carano, who was like a Imperial defector. She was like a shock trooper or something. And I had a lot of hope in Mandalorian because I like the broader Mandalorian lore, but I think it got caught up in we need to sell toys. We need to sell plushies. I think that's what killed a lot of potential for Mandalorian. Thank God Andor, like aside from the one droid, there ain't nothing cute and cuddly about that. I mean, before we kind of like wrap up the Andor conversation, like is there, so like I said earlier, you're a big movie guy, you're a videographer, a cinematographer, you teach about film. What are some like little known revolutionary pieces of media or that talk about revolution or resistance that you would like to impart upon people?
Okay, great question. So just recently watched Battle of Algiers on stream, and also one of my chatters found that there's like a section of the Andor soundtrack that is like directly, like if you play them side by side, of the Battle of Algiers score and this score, like it is very clearly a direct reference. So I think Battle of Algiers was obviously something they were referencing in Andor. But we also just watched Born in Flames, which is this like really interesting, like very super micro, if no budget probably, feature-length film about a socialist revolution that happened, a non-violent socialist revolution that happens in the United States, and it's set 10 years after this happens, and it's about like women, gay people, minority groups fighting for justice and like fighting for a place within that hypothetical dystopia, utopia. And that is very interesting. Also, another interesting fact about that movie is Catherine Bigelow is in it. Like a very young Catherine Bigelow is in it, who was like the director of Hurt Locker, and like just makes CIA and U.S. military propaganda now.
Interesting. I mean,
Yeah, so it's a very interesting
reminds
film.
me of Deidre Miro or Mirren, whatever the Imperial officer's name was.
Yeah, but that movie's really great. And then also the final one I'll suggest is Punishment Park, which was made in the 90s. And this is a really incredible film by a really incredible filmmaker named Peter Watkins. And Peter Watkins is really unique in his filmmaking because he shoots like essentially a lot of non-scripted scenes. And so he'll create these like scenarios and cast people who would be in those scenarios and just kind of has them act it out. Like, and so there's this the scenario of Punishment Park is Richard Nixon goes full fascism in like the 70s, late 70s, and arrests like all dissidents in the United States. And so you have like artists, like songwriters, singer-songwriters, Black nationalists, all these different kinds of like dissidents from the 70s, and they're put in a courtroom and forced to like to undergo these like trials, and their punishment is going into this punishment park, which is essentially a death sentence where they force them to walk like 100 miles in the Mojave Desert to grab like the idea is that if they grab this like this American flag at the end of the 100 miles, then they will be let free. But there's no water along the way, or anything like that. So it's a very, 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 very good film, especially for right now, especially for like it's a very American film about a hypothetical fascism that is very prescient for where we're at right now.
I like the idea of a patriotism crucible.
Yeah, there's that, and I mean it's also just like he's casting like real conservatives to be on like one side of these trial scenes, and like real activists who have been targeted by the state to be in the trial. So like, and they're totally non-scripted scenes. So he's just like putting the tinder there and just like letting it go, and it's like
raw.
Fucking breathtaking.
I like that. Okay, I'm gonna have
It's
to
really,
watch
really
it.
good. Yeah.
Okay, did you watch that on
definitely
stream?
Check it out. I have, yeah.
Okay, I missed that one. I've been enjoying your movie nights. I usually leave them on as I'm like, doing my late night gaming or some of my Duolingo lessons. I'll have you on in the background whenever you're doing movie nights.
Nice. What are you playing lately?
Dude, I'm trying to get good at Repo so bad for our next session because there's like a lot of
really?
secrets. Yeah, I'm solo diving.
Oh damn! I've never solo.
Oh yeah, it's a different game, and I've only gotten to like level 7. I've not made it to level 10 yet, but I've been cooking. I'm learning.
I don't think I've ever made it past level 3. So.
Oh dude, next session I got you. But yeah, this was awesome. I'm glad that we could chat about this. I don't get a chance to talk film and especially Star Wars these days, so I appreciate it.